I just really listen to myself. And I really, really, if my body starts to get kind of tense, like I know, like, okay, there's a red flag there. Like I need to either do a little digging on that on my own. I need to, like, I used to just, whatever people told me, like I believed it.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, no, you actually, all the knowing you need's really inside of you.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. Today, you're going to hear from Jessica Zimmerman. She is the author of Sleeping with a Stranger and the founder of Zimmerman Events and Education. She turned a $100,000 business loan into a 7-figure empire, all while caring for her ailing husband. Her debut book reached the Wall Street Journal's and USA Today's bestseller lists. It is a book about the power of healing, and really that's what we talk about today. We talk about how the trauma of losing her sister at just 3 years old impacted her life, her decisions, and even her parenting, how she believes happiness is not the goal, and how to understand how life is happening for us. We also chatted about operating out of fear. I felt that one, especially living in this pandemic, and how to tune into your own knowing, that and a whole lot more. So let's get to it. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start at the beginning of your story. You're just a 3-year-old and you lose your sister. Tell me a little bit about, as you look back at that, how that trauma impacted your entire life.
It impacted my entire life.
Yeah.
That is such a great way to say it. I mean, there's not a decision made or a direction taken that wasn't influencnced by the death of my sister, Courtney. So I was 3 years old. She was almost 9. And we were in a car accident. She dies. And, that was my buddy. That was my friend. And I think that at the time, I also had 2 grieving parents. And I think at the time, most adults just assumed like, oh, Jessica's young. She won't remember. Like this'll, she'll be fine. And so the focus really was on the healing for my parents. So I just felt like I had all these feelings about my sister and her being gone. And I had all this, I didn't really know the language for it. It wasn't until many, many years later that I was able to really grasp what happened. But, so many things. Like I aged emotionally about a decade the day she died. So when I'm 13 years old, the things that the other 13-year-olds are talking about or care about, like I care nothing about. And I never understood that. Like I didn't know that was the connection. And so much later when I was able to go to therapy and really learned these things, it was quite freeing. But yeah, I mean, I think to this day, the reason there's some type of impact that was supposed to be made that is only able to be made with me here physically and her guiding spiritually. Like that's the way I have to look at it.
You said you didn't have the language for it when you were 3. When you think about a 3-year-old, they have so little language for anything. My daughter is turning 3 next month and she's waking up saying, "Me want see Mickey."
Right, totally.
There's a huge disconnect in that. When you look at you as a 3-year-old, what do you see it in terms of like, how did you process that as this little girl?
Yeah, I think honestly, what's so interesting is if I hadn't have gone through it myself, I would think this same thing. Like I would think, I mean, they don't have, she doesn't even know she's calling milk Momo or whatever, you know what I mean? Like she's not going to really remember this. I think so to give a little bit of grace to anybody who has excused the grief of a very young person. It's such a natural reaction and I understand why. And I hope that my book, Sleeping with a Stranger, helps people to realize that actually isn't the case, that there's so many big feelings to the point where when I had my daughter, like they pulled her out of me. They're over there like measuring her head, right? And doing all those things. My husband's over there with them. And I get my phone out to look up what is the date 3 years, 5 months, and 23 days from now? Because that will be the exact age that I was when my sister died. So
Mm.
I need to look at her and I need to see, I need validation for myself that no, this child would absolutely, her world would be rocked. And, I remember the day that that alarm went off. And she, at that point, had twin brothers and they were her world. And I just remember thinking, yeah, like you're not crazy. Like, yes, you would
Yeah.
be completely devastated and your life would be forever changed. Of course it would. Yeah. But
As
even
a,
just think, oh, go ahead.
no, you can continue.
I was just going to say, but even just things growing up, like people assumed I was an only child and I wasn't. I
Yeah.
was a second born child, or they assumed the stereotypes that come with an only child, or even just things like in high school, I remember having this thought of like, I don't really understand what we're all like. Why are we cheerleading? Why are we like, I'm
Mhm.
5'3". I'm not going to get a basketball scholarship. Like, why do we care about this championship? And just wanting to be like, this isn't going to serve us. Like, there was just this part of me that was like, no, we get one life. It could be gone tomorrow. So why are we wasting all our time on this stuff that's kind of nonsense?
And you were 10 years emotionally 10 years older.
Yeah,
So to be
totally.
a 16, 17-year-old in high school, it was like a 26 or 27-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, as a mom, how has seeing your kids in this way, it almost seems like as you're talking about being able to see your kids have big, real emotions to what's going on around them at a young age, how has that impacted the way that you handle their traumas? I don't probably a lot smaller, but still they're different traumas and the things that upset them throughout the day. How has that helped you honor those big feelings?
Oh, in every way. I mean, I first of all know that they are not mine. Like I
Mm,
do not own them.
mm,
They are these own individual beings, and that my only job is to support them and help them cultivate the talent and the gifts that were instilled inside of them, right?
mhm,
And that comes from the fact that my mom, and once again, understandably so, I think when we can really look at the person who is maybe we're not agreeing with, or who we feel is suffocating us, or what, there's some type of conflict. If we can start to look at their life and their past, it really helps you come to an understanding rather than like a resentment.
mm,
But
mhm.
with her, it's like, well, of course she put all her energy into me. She had 2 kids and one of them died. Like, of course she's going to put all of her energy into me. So then when I left to go to college, like she had a really hard time, a really
Yeah.
hard time.
Identity.
And it was like, so for me, I just was like, I have to have something that is my own. And that's okay. And I want my kids to know I love them. I'm here to support you and help in any way, but this is also your life.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not gonna like, I want you to feel the feelings, and the goal is not happiness. The goal is to feel the feelings, because the feelings are what teach us and make us better and guide us to, that true self and all of that. Um, but I think in so many ways it has also just made me a little bit chiller of a mom. Like I remember growing up going to lunch with my mom and we would sit at the 2 top tables, and I would look over and there'd be a family, of 5 sitting at the big round tables. And I was like, that must be nice to be at the big round table. And the first time that we all sat at the big round table, I remember the kids were just like kicking each other and spilling drinks. And I was just kind of like, but isn't it great that we all, like, I just think they're the luckiest humans in the world to have each other.
Mm,
So that
mhm.
doesn't mean I don't have moments where I want to like scream, because I grew up just me. I'm very used to having a lot of time to hear my own thoughts.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
definitely have moments where I'm like, I need to go in the closet and shut the door so I can hear myself, because
Yeah.
you're all too much.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Because you were just talking about being a chill mom, we're gonna kind of jump through your story In your story, in this book, your memoir, you write about a lot of the things I think a lot of us deal with. Having a mortgage that's too expensive, questioning our purpose, not wanting to be in the town we grew up in, or this town's too small. I feel you so much on the, like, I wanted to be in New York City. Anyway, I think so many of us have similar thoughts. Your husband ends up getting extremely ill. Um, the question I want to go to, I think we're gonna wait one question and we'll go to this one first. As all this is happening, you start to recognize that you don't recognize yourself anymore. What was your realization about yourself at that time?
Well, I think that my whole life I felt like, why is this the next step? Like, what is it? Like, I talk in the book about, I feel like we are born and we're given a script. And it's like, this is how we expect you to behave. This is the path we expect you to take. This is what we expect you to do. And I remember things happening in my childhood and in my life that I was like, why is that the way to do it? You know what I mean? Or there was like this inner knowing that was like, I don't really agree with that. But you just did it because you didn't really know the other options. Like the other options weren't shown to me. So you only know what you know. And I didn't, I was born in 82. We didn't have internet yet, all these things. So you just know what you know. So I remember when it was time to go to college, I was like, this seems really dumb. Like at this point, I'm so over school. And I have absolutely no idea what I want to do with my life. I just turned 18. I think it's actually really crazy that we would ask anyone, what do you want to do with your life? Choose it. And now let's pay thousands and thousands of dollars. And then you're probably not even going to want to do it. Like, yeah. Things like that were really insane to me. And so, but I never really questioned it. I just kind of went along. So there was so much in my life that I just kind of like let that voice talk for a second. But then I was like, well, voice, this is just how it is. And when Brian, my husband, got sick, there was this moment in the hospital where the doctors wanted to remove his colon. And I just knew, like, that was not the answer. I just knew it. And everyone around me had always said, like, we just listen to the doctors. Whatever the doctor says, that is what we do. And there was just this moment where it was like my true self kind of came out and was like, no, this is, all those thoughts you've had in the past where it's like, this doesn't seem right. This is the one you stand up and you speak about. And I just remember saying I'd like release papers and I'm not going to let you remove his colon. And you have to understand, my husband was in so much pain.
Yeah.
Like in so much pain. And I didn't have any answers. And I got 3 babies at home. Like, what am I going to do? I don't know. And it was just this knowing. And that is when all of that kind of started. And it was like all of these desires that you've had, or all of these questions that you've ever had that you're like, I don't really know about that. What if you actually started to kind of do your own digging and research and figure those out on your own and align with the things that feel right? That you're no longer like, so that's kind of how that's kind of how that all started. Yeah.
How did that change the trajectory of your life and how you existed within life, understanding that you could be empowered by tuning into that inner voice?
Yeah. Well, I think I really viewed myself as this victim who survived for the majority.
I mean, you had been surviving.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I get it.
And there was a big part of me that felt the need to prove myself, or the need to like get some type of acknowledgement, or like, look, do you see, I'm not just what you think I am. I'm not this spoiled only child who gets everything handed to her. I have so many issues. I now have to, my husband was a financial advisor for over a decade and took care of us. And now overnight, I'm going to have to financially provide for our family of 5, which I have no clue what I'm doing, and figure it out. And so I just kind of had this drive, and I think it's probably stems from the fact that I lost my sister, and there was so much feeling and abandonment with that I was like, I will not lose Brian, and I will not let my 3 children grow up with such a huge loss, even though I intellectually, I know I can't control that. Like, that was kind of the drive. which allowed me to build a business that was very successful very quickly. But one of the reasons why I wanted to write Sleeping with a Stranger is because, people on Instagram and stuff would be like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you? Because everything on Instagram is real rosy, right? And it's like, I wanted them to see a lot of times, like, success isn't what it's cracked up to be. Like, here's what was happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
This is, my husband was dying. It's like, this is what drove me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I started to like really get good at business, I liked that role. And I realized I started being able to reframe and go, you know what? I'm not like this victim who survived. I'm this survivor who can actually inspire, and starting to, I don't know, and learning so much truth. I didn't believe anything I'd been taught about sex. I grew up in like this purity culture. There were so many things.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Reading some of that, I was like, oh no.
I know. And so much of that, I was just like, I don't believe that. I'm going to figure this out for myself. And there was so much freedom in that. But I also grew up in this very Southern place where like men don't stay home and women work. But we were both like really okay with that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, but he's the only one at the pickup line at school that's a man. You just kind of have to start to deal with all those things. So we came out of this really transformed, but we were completely different than how we started.
How are you able to have these different roles that maybe the culture, especially in your neighborhood, in your town, without caring what everyone else is thinking or whispering? How do you just move forward through that?
I think I have known since I was born that I wasn't supposed to live there. And listen, the town is great. Like I was like, that was the one thing when I wrote it, I was like, I hope that my beautiful town of Conway, Arkansas knows how much I love them. Like that this has nothing to do with them. This is a me thing. But like, for example, I'm very into, there was nobody I could talk to about creating email funnels. Nobody, like, they're like, what? There's very more traditional jobs. And so they don't, and they are done with work and they don't want to talk about work. Like they want to, and so I just felt so out of place. Like I wasn't with my people. And I've known that my whole life. However, I stayed so long because, and I put this on myself, not my parents, but I just felt like, haven't they been through enough? I'm their only kid. My kids are their only grandchildren. Like it's selfish of me to move. Why can't you just be grateful? There are so many great people in this town and all of this. And we did end up moving just recently to Nashville. And I have to tell you, there is such a change. Like for me, and you're a mom, so you'll understand this analogy, but it's like in Frozen 2 when Elsa is like in the castle and she's like, I should just be grateful. There's so many great people here, but what is this voice that like keeps calling? And like, I gotta listen to it. And it just keeps getting louder and louder. That's how it was for me. And then she goes to the forest and she meets other people that are like her, that have the same energy as her. And it allows her to appreciate, Arendelle even more because she's more herself. She's like her true self. And that's how I feel. I feel like the energy here, I'm with so many more dreamers and entrepreneurs. And I just feel like I'm with my people. So I even told somebody, I said, me working alone in my house in Nashville is a completely different feeling than me working alone in my house in Conway. Like it's just different. I hid Brian, my husband says that I dimmed my light in Conway, that I just kind of would hide in the house and not really be who I knew I was.
Yeah. I'm glad you listened to that voice. I'm just thinking of the, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
We definitely should not be singing when interviewing someone from Nashville. Okay. I wanted to talk about, you were talking about all these things you were going through and you're not going to let your husband die. Like you're fighting for him. And one of my favorite parts of your book is when you're talking to the therapist and you're like, I've just been going on adrenaline all these years. And he stops you and is like, you think it was adrenaline?
Yep.
And he corrects you and says, well, maybe not corrects, but he says, I think it was fear. And you write this afterward. I'm going to read it. Let's see. Quote, I had built a life based on fear of having twins, fear of losing the home I had poured my heart into, fear that if I didn't pay off all of our debt, the colitis would return, fear that I would have to be a caretaker for the rest of my life, fear that if I got sick, we had to be prepared with insurance and disability and a will, fear that we wouldn't have enough money. So I needed to flip houses while Brian was sick, fear that we would lose his job and that I'd have to take care of us by myself, fear that his new business might fail. So I had to make sure it didn't. Fear that I would live miserably for the rest of my life with a man I no longer recognized. Fear that I'd never enjoy the intimacy of a loving relationship again. Fear of my children being taken from me to the point that Stella wore a GPS belt for the first week of school. Fear that the answer to joy was anywhere but the state of Arkansas and I was missing it. End quote. I just feel that. I think everyone living in the pandemic can feel all of the fear that we've been living in. What was the change in you when you realized, oh my gosh, she was right?
Oh, I mean, it's such a big, I think when he first said it, like the knowing inside of me was like, okay, you're right. But that defensiveness comes out first, where you're like, no, like, do you know what I've been going through? Have you seen this life? Like, it's not like you get a little victimy,
And also,
so,
if it is fear, like I deserve fear.
right. I mean, wouldn't you be scared? And so, but the beautiful thing about Lynn, who is Larry in the book, the beautiful thing about him is he doesn't really say that much, but when he does, I listen. And so I really chewed on that and was like, dang it, he is right, and I think by being able to embrace that and start really going, okay, what am I actually scared of? Like, and then what are all the things that aren't in my control? I mean, that's when I'm able to like start shifting and going, I actually have no ownership of these kids. Like, I can't control them. Like, I can't keep them safe all the time. I got to let that go. I mean, there was a lot of work. I call it the underground work, of just going in the darkness and all alone and like really looking at all of your pain. Where did it stem from? And allowing it to teach you, because pain is a teacher, and it's not going to leave you until it teaches you, and it can't teach an empty chair. And so I just kept letting the chair be empty. And I think after he said that, I finally was like, okay, I'll sit down and I'll listen and I'll learn from it.
How do you feel like you're living now? How are you not living in fear?
Oh my gosh. I think that when I finished Sleeping with a Stranger, it was such a nice closure to that. I knew for several years that I would write about it, but the ending had, like, I never felt like there was a comfortable, because Brian and I kind of hated each other for a good year and a half. I mean, I was like, I don't like you at all. And he didn't like me at all. And so I was like, I mean, that can't be the end of the book. I mean, there either has to be like we decided to end it and move, like go our own way. We'd grown apart. The strangers became their own people, or there has to be, some kind of reconciliation. So I remember knowing like when, okay, that's the end of that. And so now I can write it. But I think being able to write it I was really able to kind of close that chapter, which was wonderful. But today, I mean, I just really listen to myself. And I really, really, if my body starts to get kind of tense, like I know, like, okay, there's a red flag there. Like I need to either do a little digging on that on my own. I need to, like, I used to just, whatever people told me, like I believed it. And now it's like, no, you actually, all the knowing you need's really inside of you. All of it. So let's just live from that.
What would you tell somebody in how to turn into that knowing and follow it?
So for me, I mean, I think it totally depends on what your past trauma is, but I think we all have it in some shape, form, or fashion. For me, that really meant therapy, like every week for years. But I think that also getting still every day, and this is really hard for people. I mean, we live in such a world that's like, give me all the noise. But if you can honestly take 5 minutes before everyone in your home gets up and just sit with your eyes closed and be still, I think that the knowing starts to sprout,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the thing for me is when you finally start standing up for your knowing the first time you do it. Like for me, it really had to do, one of my biggest epiphanies was with sex. And once I started learning, like, oh, all this stuff I was told is absolutely not true. I actually believe this. And I started kind of going for that, and then seeing like, oh, this can actually be really amazing. And like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't just for a man, or this isn't, like men are the only one who's gonna have orgasms or whatever. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was really learning like about things like that and seeing how great it can be was like, oh, I'm going to actually now do this with every aspect of my life that I'm kind of like, I don't know. Again, with the move, it was
Mm-hmm.
like, you have known that forever. So now let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
knowing is always a hard choice, but it's like, which is the right hard? Because
Yeah.
staying in Conway's hard, moving to Nashville's hard, but which one's the right hard?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, mm, I love that. And I love that you have the evidence now of following that knowing too, to finally move. Okay. Also, I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, I'm going to do two more questions, I think. Um, you spent so much time fixing your family. You were fixing the debt. You were fixing what was going wrong with your husband when it was physical illness, when it was mental illness. You were fixing, always fixing. But it seemed like the real change in your family dynamic happened when you started working on healing yourself.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. And I think that actually I kept all of us on that hamster wheel
Yeah.
a whole lot longer than we probably ever would have been on it,
Yeah.
because of that, because of my incessant need to control. Which, what is control? Control is just let me control all the things I think I can control, so that I don't have to face the fear of what I can't. That's why we
Mm-hmm.
control. And so
Yeah.
I was just so scared of so many things. So many things, you listed all of them, that it was this incessant need for control. And so when I started to work on myself, like I mentioned, just like learning about sex, or which really sounds so silly when I say that out loud, because people are probably like, what? You don't really know. I mean, again, purity culture tells you, just like
Right.
raises you to believe something that isn't accurate at all. And but there was that. And then there was just, I was so tired all the time. And my doctor would say, like, oh, well, you have 3 kids. That's normal. And it's like, no, I don't believe that. I don't think
Yeah.
this is normal. And so going and finding like my own person who really helped me, and starting to feel better. And then I started to feel more like myself again. I could like I could look in the mirror and go, oh, I see her. And I think the biggest difference, and my parents came to visit me recently in Nashville, and they said, we haven't seen you this happy
Yeah.
in a very long time. Like I'm really nice. Like for so many years, I wasn't. I mean, my dad, I say it in the book, my dad was like, when did you become so mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've just been able to slowly bring the walls down.
Yeah.
Because any time that you are a caretaker, and especially when you become a caretaker at 33, you just can't, there's no energy for
Mm-hmm.
anybody or anything else. You just have to do what you have to do for everyone to survive. But I didn't have to stay in this mode of survival as long as I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have loved talking to you. The last question I want to ask you is one I ask everybody. What is your number one tip to finding more joy in the everyday, in the good, the bad, and the in between?
I think honestly realizing that happiness is not the goal. We are told that over and over again. But if you look at your like 5 core feelings, mad, glad, sad, hurt, and scared, only one of those is like a positive
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
The other 4 are really more lesson learners. And so even with my kids, I'm like, no, they need to feel left out at some point on the playground. Like, my role isn't to go find that parent, that's kid's parent, and tell them like they left my kid out. No, they need to experience that so that then they can come home and I can help them with how to deal with that pain.
Yeah.
And be like, do you know why that happened? That happened to teach you how that feels so that you don't leave someone else out. Everything that happens like that is to teach us something. It's happening for you, not to you. And I want those experiences so that I can help guide my kids so that they don't become an adult and try to squash the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Because
and go and go and go and go and go and go and try to run away from it. Yeah.
Or have the control or get the addiction or whatever. Like, I want them to be able to learn. So I think that, that is the thing, is every day we have good moments and bad moments, but it's like really reframing to go, happiness isn't the goal. The goal is to be taught.
Yeah. The goal is the progress, the growth.
Totally.
Yes. I love that. I love the reframing, because I think millennial parents, they are really all up in the kids. Like, no, they can never feel bad. Nothing bad can ever happen to them. And I don't think that will serve them, especially in terms of resilience. So I love that example you gave.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending time with me here on the podcast. I'm so excited that I get to share a tiny part of your story with my listeners. And of course, I will link the book and where to find you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been so much fun.
I love talking to Jessica. If you want to hear more about her story, it is all in Sleeping with a Stranger. I will link the book. You can also find out how to connect with her in show notes. Thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.